Yes, that's me. I woke up that morning to the sound of a transistor radio playing from the kitchen. Breakfasts in my house in those days were quiet times. Well, quiet in the sense that we didn't play radios or TVs, so hearing news coming from that tiny, tinny sounding speaker was unusual. I got myself up and dressed, all while listening to the news from the other room. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was making breakfast. I don't remember what it was she was cooking, but I greeted her with saying, "Good morning. Kennedy died?" Mom looked at me accusingly and asked, "Did you have your radio on this morning?" Playing my radio in my room was strictly forbidden except for bedtime. "No, I heard it there," pointing to the small radio on the kitchen table. Not much more was said. At least that I remember anyway. I do remember going to school that June day. See, back then we went to school until the middle of June, and we actually started after Labor Day. But in school, we talked about what assassination was and how sad that another Kennedy had been killed, and our day went on. That was June 6th, 1968. I start by telling you that story of the assassination of Bobby Kennedy to contrast the reaction to Dr. King's murder on April 4th, just a few months before. The differences were many. No transistor radio with news in the morning. No discussions at school, no discussions of what happened in the aftermath. The death of Dr. King was not mentioned at Bateman Elementary School in Galesburg, Illinois. We didn't talk about the impact his life had on human rights, or the fact that much of the country was literally on fire after that event. The only rhetoric that I recall from that time, and believe it or not, I do have lots of memories from being that age, were passing comments that I wasn't meant to hear, like, "Well, we knew it was going to happen. What do you expect? They're burning down their own cities." No talk of freedom for all, no talk of lasting legacy, no talk of racism or white supremacy or privilege. That's what I remember. My memories of that terrible time. Our memories are what we have to tell the story of humanity, of our amazing adventures and our misfortunes, of those things that we can be proud of, and those things for which we can hope the memory of will stop us from doing it again and again and again. We have watched over the past couple of years people trying to rewrite the history of what happened on January 6th, rewrite who was responsible for the tragedies of 9/11, even those who will want to rewrite what happened to the Jews in Germany before and during the Second World War. The good news is we have evidence of those events, actual evidence of what happened, evidence of the truth that all we should have to do is show it to the world and they will say, "Yes, yes, it happened. It happened that way and we see it now. We believe that is true." But that isn't what is happening. People will dismiss the evidence, talk about propaganda and how the media is slanting the truth to fit their needs. So it is up to us who lived through it to tell what actually happened. But as we are seeing with many, with the loss of Holocaust survivors, and I've known several, those who live the truth, those who can share the truth are not going to be there to defend the truth, and we will be left at the mercy of those who control the flow of information to make sure the truth is still available. The truth, my friends, is what we are told and who we believe. I met Lester Maddox at a Christmas party at a fraternal organization that we both belonged to. I frankly didn't know he was a member when I joined. I even have a picture of him having a conversation with my then 5-year-old son. I tried to find it, but I think I sent it with him when he moved to Hawaii. I didn't know much about Lester Maddox, or Governor as everyone called him. But to hear it from members of the group, he was a completely misjudged man, a kind man who cared for children and those who didn't have a voice. But I think we need to look back, because the truth is what we are told and who we believe. I was told by men who I have and had great admiration for that he wasn't a racist, just a segregationist. If that is somehow better. He should be applauded because he integrated the state police and believed the state belonged to everyone. But the restaurant was his, and the axe handle incident was needed because his black employees were against segregation, and there was a throng of agitators trying to invade, and those are the words he used, invade his restaurant. Fact was, there were 3 seminary students who were trying to sit at the lunch counter at the Pickering. We believe that he didn't want Dr. King to lie and repose at the Capitol out of fear of a proposed storming of the Capitol by mourners or others. This was information given to him by undercover agents. But as we know, the facts were the funeral procession was peaceful. And the rumors were just that, rumors made up to accomplish that purpose, to keep Dr. King out of the Capitol. The truth is what you are told and who you believe. Every day that goes by, there are fewer and fewer of us that remember 1968. Dr. King and the things that really happened. We recently lost John Lewis. Ambassador Andrew Young is 92 and Jesse Jackson is 82 and declining health. And one of my dear friends, a person I call friend, Reverend John Reynolds of Seabrook Island, South Carolina, who joined the movement at age 18 in 1965, and I really am trying to hope you all get to meet him someday, is nearly 80 years old. And our own Leon Spendler, he's right there. What will happen when they are gone? Who will tell us about those awful times in 1968? Who will be there to set the record straight when those who want the world to forget spread their lies? Before too long, those who know the truth will be gone. Those of us who have had the experiences will be gone, and city upon city, state upon state are doing everything they can to make sure the stories are never told. They are banning books and forbidding the teaching of truth in schools. The truth about race, the truth about gender, the truth about religion. They are doing their best to remove the truth, so it is up to us to make sure the truth is told. We need to tell the truth about the big stories, stories about Tulsa, Dr. King and Rosa Parks, the Watts riots, and the big truths about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. We've got to tell those truths. We need to tell the small stories, the truth about Lester Maddox, the truth about white supremacy culture, and most of all, we need to tell our stories, our small stories, because when they are gone, we need to make sure those stories don't die with us. Small stories, like the one Jane shared with us about signing a petition as a school-age child in support of segregated schools when she was young. And then listen to how her heart has changed. That story she told changed me. I will never forget it, and I will share it. So today, I'm going to share 2 small stories with you. Not because I'm standing here and have the pulpit, because I want you to know them. And I want to share them so that when I'm gone, the stories can carry on. The first one happened when I was in 2nd grade. It was the same year of Dr. King's assassination. There was a new boy in school who moved in during the school year. I remember him because his name was Randy, like mine. There weren't many Randys, so we hit it off. And one day, it was a chilly day, much like today. Of course, in the Midwest, a day like today would be considered warm in the winter. I was coming back to school from lunch. At that time, you had to go home for lunch unless both your parents worked. So I got back to school, and as was our practice, we hung out on the playground until the bell rang. And I met up with my friend Katrina Kelly. We had gone to school together since kindergarten, and we even went to church together. We went to birthday parties. We did all the things together. She was playing hopscotch, and I joined in. Yes, we actually played hopscotch back in those days. Soon, the new boy, my new friend Randy, came onto the playground, and he asked me to go play on the monkey bars. Well, I was already playing hopscotch with Katrina, so I invited him to join. He said no and followed it with, "I ain't playing with no." And the word he used, I will leave you to fill in. Katrina cried. Our teacher, Miss McMasters, who couldn't have been 5 feet tall and was 100 years old, as I remember correctly, she overheard the conversation, grabbed the other Randy by his arm and dragged him into the principal's office. I don't think his feet ever touched the ground. And in those days, we had corporal punishment in schools. And again, I will leave what happened to Randy to your imagination. Needless to say, he returned to the classroom crying, and interestingly enough, he and his family moved away shortly thereafter. When I returned home that afternoon of the incident, I asked my mother what that word meant. My mother cried. She said she had hoped that maybe I would grow up having never hearing that word spoken. She explained it to me, and I struggled to understand why someone would call our friend something like that. But the story has stuck with me. It was one of the incidents of seeing racism alive in my life. And I share it with you so the story is never forgotten. The other issue actually occurred a couple years before that. The actual year it happened, and some of the details my mom and I have gone through, but we're not sure exactly the details, but here's the story. We got on the train to go visit my grandparents in Michigan. In those days, there was no Amtrak. We took the Rock Island line from the Quad Cities in Illinois, changed stations, and then took the Penn Central from Chicago to Battle Creek. When we got on in Rock Island, we sat near a woman who had 3 children with her, 2 boys my age, and a baby girl, very small. I was there, and my sister was there as well. She was maybe 1 or 2 years old. But we all ended up sitting together as the boys and I began to play while we traveled to Chicago. We discovered as we were traveling toward Chicago that they were going to Detroit, and we would in fact be on the same train between Chicago and Michigan. So after leaving the old LaSalle Street station in Chicago, we shared a cab. No seatbelts in those days. You just crammed as many people in as you could. And we went the few blocks to Union Station. At one point, and this memory is as clear to me in my head as if it were yesterday, I needed to use the bathroom. I remember the bathrooms as there was one of those pay scales right outside of it, and some other sort of arcade thing. I think it was one of those punching bags where you put the quarter in and see how strong you were. Anyway, I needed to go to the bathroom, and as it usually happens, the other 2 boys suddenly said they needed to go to the bathroom too. So their mother offered to take all the boys to the bathroom, and my mother held the baby. Many years later, I would learn of the looks my mother got while holding that baby. She ignored the disapproving eyes and comments. We boarded the next train, one in which the heat wasn't working, and headed to Michigan. Again, the boys playing, the mothers chatting. When we reached Battle Creek, we said our goodbyes, got off the train to the waiting arms of my grandparents for the drive to their house. We got to the house, my mother was crying. You see, the woman happened to be African American, and she had been traveling to Detroit from California, and because of her race, had been refused a sleeper car. So had been sitting up the entire trip from California to Detroit. The other point I want to make, and my mom and I are still not clear on all the details, but remember the woman being the wife of a serviceman who had just been sent to Vietnam, and she was going home to Detroit while he was overseas. Those are my stories. And I've told you to them before. I don't apologize for telling them to you again. We need to tell our stories. And I'm asking you to tell me yours. And if I've heard it before, I promise I will listen ever more intently this time. Tomorrow, we will share with Statesboro and the rest of the world the story of Dr. King, part of that story that was told so beautifully this morning. And thank you for sharing that with us. Most of the people there and who will be there to celebrate probably were not even alive when he was living in Georgia. Most of us don't remember 2 drinking fountains, backdoor entrances, and a would-be governor standing with an axe handle at the door of a restaurant fighting integration. We are asked at the King holiday to do service instead of seeing it as a day off to rest and eat hot dogs. Well, this year, I'm asking that service to be to tell each other our stories. Tell them to everyone who will listen, and more importantly, tell them to those who won't. Tell your stories. Tell them over and over again. And if you've heard the stories before, listen again. Listen for the parts you may have missed. Listen for the emotion in those stories. Listen for the truth in those stories. And then your job is to keep and share them. Make sure the stories never die. Because, my friends, the real truth is in the stories that are told, and belief in the people who tell them. May it be so. Amen.